everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we have some special guests, and let's see who they are right now. We have Antonio Subirats, author of The Book of the Sun. Hello, Antonio.
Hello.
And we have Jason from, Persian Scribe from the channel Be Seeing You News. Hello, Jason.
Hi, Sasha.
And I am going to be, throughout the show, I will be putting down the link to Antonio's website where you can order his book, and to Jason's YouTube channel. So check that out. Look for that upcoming.
Can I just jump in, interrupt and say, and Jason is also author of Captain Vanetti's The Lost Adventures of Captain Vanetti.
I'm so sorry, Jason. It slipped my mind. Yes, Jason is author of. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's a fantasy adventure novel I wrote in 2016, and it's called The Lost Adventures of Captain Vanetti. And some of the topics we're talking about tonight, I wrote about in my book. So if you go to lulu.com and look up my name, Jason C. Stiles, you'll find my author page.
Nice. Okay.
And if you go to Persian Scribe, my YouTube channel, you can click on the link and it'll take you right there too. So that's an easier way.
Or do a search for The Lost Adventures of Captain Vanetti. I always think of it as Captain Vanetti's Adventures, but it's like, no, it is Lost Adventures of Captain Vanetti. Sorry,
so Jason, I just had your channel on YouTube as Be Seeing You News. But your other one is?
The main channel is just Persian Scribe.
Persian Scribe. Okay, so I will edit that. Okay, so let me say hello to everyone in chat. Metadog Rides, hello. Infinite Omega is here. Capricorn 1. John Lamont and I were talking about that movie yesterday. Antonio, I don't remember if it was you who recommended it to me. About a year and a half ago. For anyone who doesn't know, it's a fantastic movie that really reveals how the moon landing could have been faked. And because it's a fiction movie, but it's so clearly based on the truth, it's entertaining. There's the narrative. So it's a really good movie. I really recommend it. Rick Rold is here. Magic hands for him. Slipknot. Oh, everybody's here today. Adelaine, hello. So... Spake Face, hello there. Javier is here again. I did a long live stream last night. If you're interested in anything at all related to conspiracy theories, you can check that out after this. But today, I think I'm going to get Antonio Subirats to set us off, to introduce the topic that we're going to talk about today, while I get a share screen set up to show the article that we'll be referencing.
Okay. So, and this comes from Sasha some few months ago. She mentioned that the military had just released a press release about how their infantry were going to be training to fight in underground megacities. Underground, like their army is spending $500 million to train soldiers to fight underground. Now this is not just fight on the ground as in, shopping malls. They're talking about fighting in underground mega cities. Now, mega cities are cities supposed to be cities that hold 10 million people or more. Very huge. I don't know if that's the term in which they're referring to it. But why is the military training for policing duties? Because we think, they're training to fight in underground cities. They're training for operations in underground cities. Some of those operations might include shooting people, or some of them might be a case of just policing, keeping order. Who knows? It's the military. They don't just shoot people.
One of the interesting things that I think that's mentioned in the article is they say an assessment last year estimates that there are roughly 10,000 large-scale underground military facilities around the world that are intended to serve as subterranean cities, says an army source. So it's not, so we know about the deep underground military bases, but this is something different from that. These are these huge mega cities that are built underground. And then on top of that, now $500 million being spent to train soldiers not just to police the deep underground military bases, but these massive cities, and how to fight in the connecting tunnels between these. So this is a whole different level of complexity. And we really do have to ask ourselves, why are they prioritizing this? Well, there's so many things going on. We're preparing for a recession. The Middle East is still a quagmire. Why are they spending all this money on training all
they
these?
Could be fighting fires. Sorry, Sasha. They could be fighting fires, you know. They have a lot of personnel. They could just lend them to Australia, who's struggling with fires. They could do all kinds of stuff, but instead it's like, no, we need to train to fight. We need to train underground. Like, oh, interesting, for strategies, because obviously it's going to be different dealing with things underground to dealing with things above ground. There's going to be lots of similarities, but there will be differences too, like fighting in hellishly long tunnels. You know, that's going to you have to. Soldiers are almost like animals that have to be trained to do things. No disrespect to anybody who's been in the military, but I'm pretty sure that you'll agree. So if we're going to be in a tunnel for days on end fighting, so you need to be trained into it. You need to be conditioned. You don't want people freaking out, you know, so they need to be conditioned to do it. And I think that this is why they're actually announcing they're going to be doing this, which pretty much means they're doing it already.
And and the fact that they've leaked it, like, I think this is, I really do think that leaks like this, that not just that the information came out, but that the information was published online and that it's still available online. If there's a leak of information on like an independent website that the military doesn't want getting out there, they'll have that removed, right? But the fact that it's still there I think it's been a year now, I think that shows that they do on some level want to start preparing the population for the idea of, look, at some point in the near future, we are going to have to go underground. We have these massive cities prepared for you. We have a trained force that are ready to police it and to protect you from other people down there, right? And that's the thing. So can we talk about some of the other nations that have underground cities?
Jason, do you want to go ahead, or do you want me to?
Go ahead. I mean, I think something that pops in my mind right away is we knew back during World War II that Germany had built many, many underground bases, and those technologies that were used, the building methods were brought over after World War II to this country. We went over there and we're like, wow, these are really fortified very well. These thick walls. So a lot of that same knowledge from over there came over, like a lot of other things with Operation Paperclip and whatnot. So, I mean, I think pretty much at this point, all the countries are thinking in those terms of privacy, from a military standpoint, having privacy and having things underground and not in the public sight from, the ogling people with the cameras and, yeah. So you see that with Area 51, where they kept pushing people farther and farther out from the base. So, they keep, but, everything underground is away from public sight. So,
and there's also the universities that aren't kept in the loop, and they're studying, going, geez, we're getting a lot of tremors. We're having a lot of very long continuous tremors. Like, yes, because there's a great big, huge drilling machine down there making holes. Well,
and I think cities like Seattle, the tunnel project between England and France. I mean, it's been widely known, and we've got these technologies to drill deep and to build unbelievable structures. So to be more precise in our language, there are a lot of people that get triggered in the UFO community, for example, when you bring up deep underground military bases, the DUMBs. They think you're automatically talking about, there are these stories of aliens being at these bases, and we're doing, people automatically their minds, their imaginations jump to those types of conclusions that's the topic we're talking about. But really, drilling technology has been around for decades. Richard Sauder is a really good, interesting researcher in this topic. He's written many books, been interviewed many times. You can find his stuff on YouTube very easily. Sauder, Richard Sauder. He's talked about this, but again, a lot of this stuff, like with any topic, gets muddied with a lot of disinfo, and we're talking about aliens have secret bases. And remember a couple years ago, Jimmy Church Fade to Black show had that story where it's breaking news that we found on a satellite image that there's a base off the coast of Malibu, a UFO base.
Oh yeah, I remember that. There was like basically sonar of a structure on the coast of California or off the coast of California, and it wasn't really clear what it was. And it was clearly a man-made structure, and it was huge. And rather than just leave it at that kind of thing, just give the information, people then started making all these assumptions, saying, it's an alien base. And there was really no reason to jump to those conclusions. And I think that's true. I think as soon as you talk about deep underground military bases, and I'm the same, right? Because I'm a coast to coast AM devotee. So I also think immediately about some of the witness reports that have come out about the aliens that are in these deep underground military bases. But what we're talking about here is something very different, right? And we're trying not to speculate too much and just look at what is the evidence that supports this theory. So we know that the military are saying, yes, we have these underground structures. Yes, they're mega cities. Yes, they have avenues that are as wide as massive boulevards in some of the biggest American cities above ground, right? And this is admitted to in the article. And we're training our fighters to be able to be effective, to keep the peace, and to defend these mega cities. And so that just in and of itself, those are the facts that we're then using as a foundation for our theories. But just that in and of itself is very startling and I think very surprising for people who haven't been doing a lot of research in these topics. And so now all of a sudden we say, okay, so why are they doing this? What is this about? Why would we need large cities underground? What kind of defense would we need, and from whom? And it's not about saying we'll need defense from the underground reptilians. It's about saying if we have these underground cities, there are two possibilities. One, maybe there are other countries that also have them. Maybe other countries come here and have their own here, right? Like maybe there's an invasion. Maybe China says, okay, well, we're taking California and we're taking all the underground bases and mega cities available in California. And then we start moving eastward. And so then the US military has to be able to defend whatever underground cities that the Chinese maybe try to take. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is just that it would be a lot harder possibly to have control over all these underground cities if people are traumatized by having to go underground and are harder to rule. You might lose one to anarchists, and so then all the other ones around it, when those anarchists run out of food, they're going to start attacking all the connected cities. So you need a really strong military presence in all those connected cities so that the anarchists that destroy their own little underground city don't then come raiding yours, right?
There's also another possibility, which might be that the army train for possibilities they haven't thought of.
Yes.
Do you want to have a group of people there that can defend the ones that don't have weapons? Or would you rather they didn't have any? You know, like you don't know what's going to happen. If the guns aren't necessary, there's no problem having had them there. If they become necessary, but you don't have them there, then you're stuck. And that's the end of humanity, perhaps. Who knows?
You brought up before about wanting to have this have the public kind of warm up to the idea to that there are these bases. Well, a few years ago, if you guys remember, I don't know if you saw this, Jesse Ventura's show, Conspiracy Theory, they had an episode where they went to the Ozarks and he found where this underground base was, and he's driving around in the vast parking lot, and you could tell it was just an immense structure. I don't know if anyone remembers that
I don't
episode.
remember that episode. I did watch many of them, but then
Right.
I lost track.
The whole episode was about these sorts of are these technologies available? Are these bases being built? So clearly it's in the public domain. Also, you have shows like Stargate SG1. Brandon in the chat mentioned Cheyenne Mountain. Well, at the beginning of every episode of Stargate SG1, which went for 10 seasons on Showtime, and then it switched to Sci-Fi Channel. I love that show, by the way. I was a big devotee of that show because it drew in a lot of interesting mythology. The idea that the idea that gods were just merely from another place and they had more advanced technology than the peoples of living on Earth at the time. Anyway, Stargate, it was one of the rare shows that had the Air Force consulting on every episode. And in fact, some of the Air Force generals, I believe, made appearances, like little cameo appearances in some of the episodes. So if you watch the end of the episodes, you see the credits roll, and you always saw the consultation of the Air Force, for each episode. Also, another thing that ties in to Stargate was a big story arc later on in the series was that the Russians or whatever found a buried Stargate, a second Stargate, in Antarctica, buried under the ice of Antarctica. And then eventually they found a base under Antarctica, which was the race of aliens that built the Stargate technology, the ancients. They made this, basically Earth was a colony, and so they built this base in Antarctica as a kind of a Star Wars defense system. It protected the planet from other invading species or whatever. So anyway, all this stuff is kind of out there in the public domain for quite a few years. People are talking about it. So
if you think about Bird's missions to Antarctica, here goes Bird with 5,000 personnel and how many ships, and they don't go there for nothing and just leave. But they don't tell us, oh, they went there with a heck of a lot of steel, welding equipment, and cables. And the base is there, obviously, because there are military personnel there. And the military personnel are not staying in igloos. They're not staying in makeshift shelters. They're staying in bases, and the bases are not above ground bases. Why would they be when they could be underground and don't need so much heating? So, but not only that, if you say to people underground bases, they go, yeah. You don't have to explain to them because everybody is already familiar. Everybody, if you say, oh yeah, it's like and if you ever spoke to a more elderly person, they would say, oh, you mean like an air raid shelter? Well, kind of, yes, like that. It's already there in the collective mind.
And I think yes, I think that they put these things in the fiction, in our entertainment, to kind of make us more comfortable with these ideas. But I think maybe more fascinating to me, I think, is that we actually find archaeological evidence of underground cities from the past, cataclysmic events. And Antonio, that was something that I thought that maybe you could tell us a little bit about.
I think Jason might be able to tell us about more, but I mean, I can tell you from the Chinese mythology, the ancient mythology of the Chinese starts off, people were there, the Yellow Emperor arrives with his helpers who start instructing the people on how to make dams. It's like, okay, that's in China, great. If you go to the region, Jordan, that region, the Middle East, you have the oldest dam ever, some 3,000 years before our current era, supposedly. Very, very old. It's like, well, those dams, like, that's interesting. Where those dams are, further upland, like up, you got underground cities in Turkey and these regions. You have these underground cities. You have Petra too, but you have these places that are built near where there was also the building of dams. Which means people with the ability to create large structures, and these large structures left us the signs in the shape of dams, and then also the kinds in the shapes of large underground cities. In China, we know they have large underground cities because they've made them into kind of, national attractions.
Yes.
And
So
the fact that it's the Chinese mythology blended into the real world, these are the mountains and these are the cities in these mountains that come from their mythology. But the cities are there in those real mountains. And people can say, oh, it's back engineered. You're losing the track. There are underground cities in China. Now, China is building a lot of above ground cities that are empty. This does not mean that because of building above ground cities which are empty, that they're not also building underground cities which are empty. And the Chinese are working on emergency schedule right now. They're buying Australia, building dams in Australia. Like, they're buying Africa, they're buying South America, and everywhere.
That's part of their Belt and Road Initiative.
It's part of how they say, look, guys, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know which way is the best way to go. Let's just make bases everywhere we can and just hide there. That's what I think is happening. But, I mean, apart from that, as Sasha's showing, you have all these ancient cities that exist. They're not pretend. They're not a hoax where somebody did it recently and they're pretending that they're thousands of years old. They are thousands of years old. They are old enough that the history, the linear history from that time has been lost and confused by more recent history, which tells us different stories, but they are there. The cities are there.
Well, you have the Dead Sea Scrolls are kind of a very triggering topic for a lot of people, whether they're, verifiable, scientifically, whether they're really what they claim to be. But what's interesting is the area that they're supposedly found in, the Qumran caves in Jordan, I believe. It's just a really fascinating area. So, for thousands of years, just in that area alone, they're just these vast cave structures that we haven't even barely, explored. As far as like China goes, who knows what's going on there, because the information flow is not exactly there. There's supposedly that many pyramids that have been found that they just don't let people take pictures of. There's no investigations. Like in Turkey, you have Göbekli Tepe, which goes back to, it's been dated to possibly around 13,000 years ago. And the government of Turkey in the last few years has kind of shut it down basically from further investigation. They've covered it up. And so Göbekli Tepe alone is evidence that prior civilizations, very, very, very fascinating and advanced civilizations that had just unbelievable ability to move huge rocks, huge stones, and we don't know anything about these cultures, but they were there, and in these areas where they're very protected from, and it's almost like why were they in these hilly areas? I guess tepe means a hill in Turkish. So yeah, I mean, and then South America is just another whole topic too. You've researched this a lot, Antonio, where so many of those amazing cities are still, even to this day, lost, just immersed in the overgrown rainforests of Peru and Bolivia and whatnot. So,
and later, what happens? Cultures come along, develop, build, survive, grow, and start writing a history that addresses some of that truth. For instance, the religion of the West, which comes mainly from the Bible, which comes from the Middle East, says that man, if you want to read around between the lines, that man came out of the ground. He was made out of clay. It's like, no, came out of the ground. The Chinese, same thing. The man came out of the ground. The North American Indians, man came out of the ground. So they call their ancestors the ant people. It's because we went on the ground to survive.
The Anasazi, yeah, in the Southwest.
Yes.
They talked about the ant people.
It's all, and this idea of going underground, going into the caves, which is what we're talking about, but now we're talking about highly technologically advanced caves, man-made caves with flushing water and all of those things. And now we have the military saying, oh yeah, we're going to train for fighting in those things just in case we need to. And the rest of the world is kind of, oh, well, what's Trump doing today? Good gosh, we just had an election in Britain. Like, oh, and all these transgenders. And it's like, you know, there's serious stuff going on in the world, don't you? You know, the moon for 4 months had a 30-day cycle between full moon to full moon to consecutive months. That's not kind of normal. You know, it's like there's stuff happening. The astronomers and astrophysicists are saying magnetic field is waning. We're having too much radiation. The chemtrailing's going on. The fires in Australia, and the firemen saying these are not normal fires. So either there's political intrigue and sabotage, or the level of radiation there is changing how matter performs, and it's bursting into flame a lot easier than it normally would. Don't know, but the point is, there are underground cities that have been built. The American military say, we estimate some 10,000 of them. Like, that's interesting. Here in Britain, there's a local radio near me, Manchester. The DJ, one of the most popular DJs, talking about how a friend of his had recently told him they're building underground bases in the Northwest. The next day, he was fired. That's it.
Say that again, Antonia?
So DJ in Britain, in Manchester Radio, P103, announces that a friend of his just talking, they're talking about conspiracy theories. I said, yeah, conspiracies. I've got a friend of mine who was telling me they're building underground bases here in the north. The next day, fired. So you can't say things like that live on the radio in Britain. Apparently, you know, it takes them a while to catch up. They'll have to come to YouTube and watch what's going on, you know. But and eventually they will announce it, but they can't announce it now because with all the dim-dims in the world, they will say, but we have lots of homeless people. If we've got underground bases, why don't you house them in the underground bases? Like, no, it doesn't work like that. If you house them in the underground bases, then people will choose to not work and not contribute and just go and live free in the underground bases. And then this will just create more people who will want to go and live there and small communities, and you've got to police them. And no. We're the ones running the show, and we say no. And that's how the powers that be see things. They're not going to say, oh, yeah, okay, let's open up the bases, house the homeless there. And this is what the dim-dims would say. If you've got underground bases, if it's true you've got underground bases, why aren't you housing the homeless? Like, it's not as simple as that. This world doesn't work like that. Anyway, that's my little rant.
No, I think it's quite... Sorry, Jason, were you going to say something?
I was just going to bring up the Grand Canyon. It's really interesting. It kind of ties into a lot of some other subjects, the missing 411 topics of the David Bowie, the researcher. But there's these national parks. I'm speaking about, you know, I don't know too much about what's going on in other countries, but in the national parks in America are very curious to me. It's another, I mean, it's one thing to talk about military bases, but then when you're talking about national parks and state-owned land and federal-owned land, there's a huge amount of land that is basically off limits to the public. And I find that curious too. You know, you have the stories of the Grand Canyon going back to the early 1900s where the Smithsonian caught wind of structures being in the Grand Canyon, the floor of the Grand Canyon, like possibly looking like kind of sort of like Petra, where you have the columns and whatever built into the side of the side of the mountain. So it makes you wonder how much information has been just obscured. In my book, I talk about the obscurantists of the within the Catholic Church, but you have a huge movement around the world of obscurantism in the world of academia. Michael Cremo, in his book The Forbidden Archaeology, is replete with examples of things being kind of, well, this doesn't fit in our mainstream idea of what we're presenting. The narrative would be upset too much, so let's put this in the gray box and kind of shove it aside and not talk about it. And so that's what happens a lot too. It's not so much what gets reported, it's what doesn't get reported that's just as interesting.
And as soon as they put it in the gray box, it becomes the subject of myth. So you can show somebody with a 2 meter long femur, human femur, and it's like, that's the femur of a giant. It's like, no, it isn't. They must have hidden it. It must have been plaster cast. It's a hoax. You can't check. The important thing is, it's in the grey box. You can't check. You can't take a DNA analysis, especially if they say, oh, no, we destroyed that. It's like, well, no, you definitely can't check. But I bet you anything you'll find remnants of that DNA in the dinosaur bones, that they fabricate in China, in those factories that make dinosaur bones out of melted chicken, pork, and whatever other creatures. But anyway, that's by the by. There are underground places, there are regions, huge regions, where you just can't go. I mean, you think, oh, I might just wander off in this direction, but you arrive at a fence. It's like, right. Okay, so now go through the fence. Great. Now you carry on walking. Eventually, people come up with guns. What are you doing here? This is a restricted zone. This is a restricted area. Now, not only do you have to leave, but you have to leave. And if you tell people, they think you're a crackpot. They don't believe you. And if you make it back. Or you could just end up being another one of these missing people that go missing in the US, all over the place. Just people that go out and just never return home. And I'm not talking about people who abandon the families. I'm talking about people, healthy people who move out, who lead a healthy lifestyle. They go out trekking and they never come back. And there's an alarmingly high number of them.
So this is the David Paulides Missing 411. I was trying to find the map because recently in one of his interviews, they discussed and they showed a map overlaying the clusters of missing people, mostly national parks, but also now we're seeing more of these cases in cities as well, overlaid onto cave systems in the United States. And it's really interesting to see because the clusters of missing people tend to be above the areas where there are massive underground cave systems. So there does seem to be a correlation there. There's an echo, I don't know whose it's from, but maybe earphones, I don't know. And someone was saying there's a clicking sound. When I share a screen, it clicks. And so if I'm preparing to share a screen, it's clicking. So I apologize I didn't realize that the audience is hearing it as well. So I'll try to minimize the screen sharing.
Your camera is frozen, by the way, Sasha.
Is it?
Yes. This end.
Damn it. Okay. Thank you for letting me know.
So I'm going to find headphones. So at least that will be that situation.
Or you know what, Antonio, what I'll do is I'll just mute you and then I'll talk and see if it's you. Okay, now I'm going to mute Persian Scribe. Oh, see, now I don't hear my echo with Persian Scribe muted. And now I do hear it when I have Antonio muted. So Persian Scribe, I think it's you. It's not Antonio.
I'm sorry.
I know, I feel bad for pointing out Persian Scribe. It's all your fault.
By the way, Adeline in chat mentions Praveen Mohan. He's one of my favorite researchers. His channel is phenomenal travel videos. Oh, guys have to watch that channel.
Who is the name of the person?
Adeline Marie Robinson has it in the side chat or in the chat. It's Praveen Mohan. and his YouTube channel is called Phenomenal Travel Videos, if my memory serves correct.
Okay.
Hey, there's a Mensa in the chat. Just thought I'd mention.
Is there a Oh, hello, Mr. Mensa. What Mensa chapter are you in? And are you going to do you go to the annual general meetings? Let me know, because I'm thinking of going to the AGM in January. So Mensa has all these little local events, right? So they have like meetups for drinks and meetups for dinners, and then they have the dim sum night and whatever. They have all these different things. But then I don't know. It's a lot of trouble, and some of them are further away. And so then I thought, instead of going to kind of all these little events where maybe a few people show up, I'm just going to go to the annual general meeting in January, so that I can kind of get a bigger sense of like, who are the people that are in this organization. So if anyone in chat is in it, maybe you guys can tell me what are the events that are the better events for meeting a wider range of people. Okay, that's it. I'm done talking about that. Sorry. As an aside.
Can we look back at what the military said in their release? I opened a whole bunch of windows, but I think it's going to cause more problems if I try to share.
Well, do you want me? Well, it might be interesting to see if it clicks when you share, or if it only clicks when I share. So do you want to try to share screen?
I'll try, because I closed them all. I just heard that. All that I did was to write underground cities first, and then underground megacities. So underground cities, just a second.
Okay, and people in chat, can you let us know if it clicks when Antonio is sharing his screen, or if it's only clicking when I'm sharing my screen, just so I get a better sense of how the software is working.
Okay, so let me share screen. I'm hearing it now myself.
Are you?
Yeah, but it's okay. Can you see what I'm showing?
Oh, I have to add Book of the Sun. Nope. Book of the Sun. You're sharing the wrong tab. You're sharing your screen, but it's just showing me StreamYard.
Oh, okay, that's strange. I asked it to share. Right, give me a second.
Yeah. And I love that you have the night time version of it. You'll have to, after we get off, you'll have to show me how to do that.
Okay, so application, Opera tab, and underground, where is it? Bases. Oh, no, wrong one, sorry.
I feel like we should be drinking. Someone said something, you guys are taped. And I don't know what he meant by that, but it sounded like, to me, it sounded like he thinks that we're drunk. And it occurred to me, this seems like a really good time to have a drink. At some point while you're sharing, Antonio, I might go pour myself a glass of wine.
Go ahead.
One of the things John LeBon brought up, and yes, I can see your share. I'm going to put it up on the screen in a second, Antonio, but was that I don't do interviews with people. Even with John McAfee, where I was really wanting to do an interview, I don't really interview my guests. It's like I invite you over to my house, and then we're just having a conversation, except then there are other people around and they just listen in, right? But with chat is awesome, because then they can also participate in the conversation. I was saying I quite like that, because I like going to a party and you can just kind of go and move from one crowd to the next. And if someone's having an interesting conversation, then you listen to their conversation, and then maybe you say a couple things, That's the kind of hangout that I prefer, rather than a more formal question answer kind of thing. That's also why I interrupt, and I'll talk over people, and I don't mind when people talk over me and interrupt, because I feel like it does give it more of a sense of, hello, welcome to my party.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm adding yours to screen, and then I'm going to go get myself a little drink.
So when you're looking, when looking at these, you have to bear in mind that some of these will be concept cities, so images that have been rendered by artists on computers. Here we see a whole series of ancient cities, including this one, which is an underground salt city in Poland.
Oh, wait, I have to come in for this. I went to an underground salt mine in Romania, And it was mind-blowing, and I will share some of the pictures of it when I get back, because they are incredible. And the idea that they were built by people with the low tech that we are told, it's not believable when you stand in the middle of these salt mines. So please talk more, because I can hear you. I have my mic on.
It doesn't gel when you compare the evidence versus what we're told. It just doesn't gel at all. Here we have Finland building an underground city here. I'm not going to hit it because sometimes it diverts you to various different pages, but these are real things. This here, these are real places. There's underground shopping malls in Japan. There are underground cities. Well, the US military are estimating some 10,000 of them. That's rather a lot. And we're not seeing 10,000 here, but we're seeing a lot of structures like this. We're seeing lots of underground cities. So no wonder the military are training for, you know, eventualities, possible eventualities in underground cities. And this is just from a search for underground city. Okay. If I write underground bases, let's see what it shows.
That's delicious. So
now you have these things. Now these are large systems. And then you've got these kind of childish UFO-y ones. But we have to remember the X-Files also had deep underground military bases. And these are huge tunnels and huge bases that are joined by tunnels. Obviously, if you're going to be living underground, it's because you can't just go to the surface and walk around or travel around the surface. You're going to need connection to other cities by underground tunnels. It's kind of necessary. And this is just from writing in the search underground bases. Now let's see what happens when I write megacities.
Oh yes, that would be the key.
Yeah. So these are plans, ideas that are planned. The Chinese are building cities that are blended into the side of walls of mountains. Sorry, so the vegetation grows all over the facade of the buildings.
Say that again, Antonio.
The Chinese are building cities that are fused to the side of hills, so that the vegetation is incorporated by the facade of the buildings.
Oh.
I'll see if I can find. But these are, and this is just the result from underground mega cities. I don't know what it's showing really, but now Chinese garden city.
Javier Fernandez says, at times in the King Canyon National Forest, I hear loud metal moans like huge gates being opened underground. I think that's very interesting, Javier, that you are hearing, that there's this metal scraping sounds from underground in these areas, in canyons or under them, right? In our national forests and national parks, that publicly owned land, there seems to be a lot of stuff going on under that ground, right?
Yes, and of course, so we have the myth that it's just a bulldozer scraping cement, you know, because that's a fun thing to do for a guy that drives a bulldozer. Oh, it's just flattening the cement.
Yes.
So, could this be something where somebody just said, look, I've been tasked with giving an excuse for these weird noises in the middle of nowhere. Can you, I'll give you $100 if you just scrape the cement for a while in the car park. Okay, I'll do that. The guy scrapes the cement for a while, makes a big loud noise. I say, there you go, that's your noise. Crop circles. I remember looking at crop circles, and then you have the skeptics who say, oh no, crop circles, all of them made by man. Look, here's a video. They made a documentary, and you see a guy in this documentary, and it's infrared cameras, and the guy goes, you know, the main guy's here, and there's a guy in the background. The guy in the background just goes like this and looks at his drawing, his thing. Oh, very good, very good. Yes. Except he hasn't got a torch, and they're all in the dark. What the hell has he just looked at if they're all in the dark? He only saw this through the camera because it's an infrared camera. This is just done for the stupids who don't think. In the dark, you're not going to pull out something you can't see in the dark to see what you need to do in the dark. You know,
The infamous Doug and Dave in the UK.
Yeah, that kind of well, there was those guys first, because like we need somebody to explain this. David Icke wasn't around at the time, not quite, kind of, but the things that like, oh, Doug and Dave, did you do the Nazca lines too? Go on, tell us about your holiday in South America. Go on.
Yeah. But the thing is, people are so ready to believe. I think that this is the thing. People, the masses, they are desperately wanting a mundane explanation that doesn't require them to reassess their understanding of the world, of their religious beliefs or lack thereof. And so I think that they don't really care if it's plausible or not, as long as they can pretend that it's plausible and they can cling to that, right? So, and I have family members like this. So the crop circles, it bothers them to think that there might be aliens, and bothers them even more to think that there might be something even more weird that's causing crop circles, right? It's not even little green creatures. At least you can kind of make sense of that, but it's maybe this, I don't know, something even weirder. And so when they say, when they're told like, oh yeah, there's these two British men, they're drunkards and they just went into the field with a plank, and that explains all the, like, on some level, they know that that's not plausible, but they just want to not have to think about the reality that there might be something other than this, right? And I think that they just cling to that so stubbornly. And I do think that the powers that be, they understand that about people, and that's why they put out so little effort into coming up with better explanations for things. I think it's because they don't have to. The majority of people will buy the two drunk British men are responsible for all crop circles around the world, right?
I think it's more than just they understand this. I think the reason they understand this is because they have made that kind of mind. That through education, through whatnot, they've inculcated that kind of mentality with intelligent adults. We're talking about crop circles. Oh yeah, no, it's all made by guys. Yeah, look at this documentary. I'm watching the thing with them. The guy pulls out the paper thing, and I go rewind, and they rewind and say, "Why is that guy pulling out a piece of paper in the dark if he hasn't got any kind of light or anything?" And they go, "I don't know," and that's it.
Yes.
Not, oh, maybe that guy was just there to think. Oh yeah, and they're working in the dark, and so they look. And what now? Oh yeah, 3 steps that way. Okay, and just something facile. But you look at the details, you go, "There's no light."
But here's a thought that's more concerning. What if it's not just that the system has set up, or not the system, the powers that be here have set up an education system, an entertainment system, and a cultural system that brainwashes so many people to not think further than that, or to not have any critical thinking skills? What if that's not the case? What if it actually is the case that the majority of humans are NPCs and only a few of us are not NPCs, and the NPCs are just easily programmed? And so you edit the program and then you run that script, and the NPCs do what they're supposed to do, and they accept that script, and now they're reprogrammed. And those of us who are not NPCs, well, you can't reprogram us, and we look at the script and we can actually assess it and evaluate it, and we say, well, that's a ridiculous theory.
There's so many topics that it's so easy to just inject that little bit of confusion and to muddy the waters. That is the genius of misinformation and disinfo, and it's been a tactic for thousands of years.
And simulation hypothesis is just one of those things. Let's face it, simulation hypothesis was developed by a pothead at uni, thinking, pondering, what if, and then discussed it, and that grew, and eventually it was embraced by people going, that might be the case. I'm not saying it isn't. Well, I am. I'm saying it isn't. Okay, that's not the case. It is not the case that there are non-player characters. That leads into a very slippery.
Are we allowed to kick the NPCs in the shin? Are we allowed to, because they're just NPCs, so their feelings don't really matter?
But this is the thing. You kick them in the shin and they go, "Ow, the heck you do that for?" It's like, "Oh, you were just programmed to do that." You know,
I know, right?
yes, but this is the thing. That idea, it's a skeptical argument in a different dress. That's all it is. It's like, oh, very good. Tell me again about NPCs. Right. Don't poke in the eye. Quick. No, tell me again about NPCs. Oh, you just put me in the eye. No. You're an NPC and you've been programmed to behave like that. You know, it is I don't want to say a rabbit hole. It's a skeptical argument, and the skeptical argument doesn't seek to arrive at truth. It just seeks to posit questions in what appears to be quite resolved when it might be falsely resolved. What's been resolved might not be the case. So you bring in the skeptical argument to say, reevaluate. And
well, I think we live in such an instant gratification society that if you think you've found a nugget of truth, you want to, there's that urge in the truth community, whatever that is, to want to spread that information and tell as many people about it as possible, not understanding that there really is everyone's at a different point in their lives. Various people, if you took one person at a time and friends, family or whatever, and talked about these sorts of topics in the simplex manner and just walk them through one thing at a time, they would, I think, these quote unquote NPCs, you'd see the light go on, but it's like everyone's processing information differently and is at a different point in the journey. And it's really easy to lose track of and not have empathy and sympathy for people that maybe just don't have time to look at some of these sorts of things.
Yeah. With the NPC, sorry, Sasha, with the NPC, it's like, okay, so tell me about the programmer. You can always escalate it to that. Tell me about the programmer. Does the programmer exist? And you can escalate, and they excuse it with a fractal universe kind of thing. Oh no, the programmer, it's a many program system. It's a feedback loop of information that just no. It sounds like you're just kind of making things up, and you can't prove it, and you can't disprove it. In which case, it's not really even a theory.
It's very easy. People coming from, it's either people are. I find this dialectic created where either you're one of the unwashed masses, or you're part of academia or the technocracy, and I think ever since H.G. Wells talked about this sort of thing, Jules Verne too. And speaking of Jules Verne, he talked about the boring machines and whatnot. Yeah. But anyway, but there's that dialectic that's created that I don't really like, and I just don't accept that either you're part of the unwashed masses or you're part of the technocracy that's clued in, and I don't know. It's a trap.
I think someone, Mr. Mensa mentions something about the 144,000. The Mormons have this idea that only 144,000 humans get to go to heaven, which is basically they get to go to the safe planet, and everybody else has to stay here and die in the cataclysm. And so I think that a lot of myths and religious beliefs that develop do distinguish between the people who have souls, or the chosen, or the 144,000, or the avatars that are actually being played by peoples. And then, like you said, Jason, the unwashed masses, the soulless, the NPCs. And I think although I know what you're saying, that sometimes it's just people with different capacities or interests, and sometimes it's just they haven't been awakened yet, or they haven't been taught critical thinking skills. I think that that's a lovely idea, because it kind of brings us all more empathy, more compassion for other human beings. But I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure that's true. I actually suspect that there actually might be a difference among us.
So this is the thing. Is there a difference amongst us? Yes, there is. There really is.
But do people, I think a lot of what's been thought of as our egos and our personality traits, kind of tying it back into the larger topic tonight, how much thought has been given to that? There's that genetic memory. Graham Hancock talks about our species being a species with amnesia, and that how much of our egos and what we take in from our five senses and what drives us on a daily basis is unresolved genetic memory of that past traumas, of catastrophes. So I think it's not a new phenomenon that people on YouTube or just in general or in this conspiracy culture, that they're worried about things coming to an end and the resets and all that kind of stuff. I suspect every generation that's lived on Earth has faced similar challenges, different challenges based on levels of technology and the cultures, but that in the back of your mind, that's unconscious liminal sense of doom or trauma unresolved from our genetic memory of what has happened to us in the past.
Yeah, well, I would say this in terms of the reset. There is no reset. There's growth. So when you have reset, it's like, okay, when did we drop the technology? If it's reset, there was a civilization that developed the technology to make these things. When would we have the technology to make those things? If it's a reset, then we're just reliving. It's like the chessboard, the pieces being put back into place. That's a reset. Reset to factory default. That's a reset. The reset is to put it back as it was. There's no reset. There's advancement. There's evolution. There's growth. And I mean evolution as in baby evolving from baby to adult. Okay, it's in growth, not evolution as in theory of evolution. There's growth, and what's happening and what has happened in the past, what people refer to as a reset, it's a calamity that leads to a renewal, but it's not a reset. They say reset, and it's misleading to say reset, because it's a reset back to the beginning. It's like, no, it's continue from now on, always, continuously. Surface dwelling creatures going to underground. Is the going to underground a reset, or was the being on the surface a reset? Now you come out of the underground. Is now being on the surface a reset, or was the going into the underground a reset? None of it is reset. It's all progression. It's growth. It's the system. It's how it behaves.
But I think that the idea of the reset is, like, I see what you're saying, but I think it's also just this idea of when whatever cataclysm occurs that sends us underground, when we come back up again, we are set back in terms of where we're at for technology, for our infrastructure, for the organization, for the resource distribution. And so it is kind of, okay, well, now it's a bit chaotic. We have to figure out how we're going to make this work all over again. We have to reestablish a system of living above ground. We have to reestablish our infrastructure, our power systems, and all the rest. And so I think that, but I do understand what you're saying. I want to say something about the chat. People in chat, you are wonderful. I appreciate you so much. You guys are bringing up so many good points, and I'm trying to listen to Jason Antonio, but at the same time, I'm like, oh, I want to read that comment out loud because I think that that's so interesting, and we could talk about that. But then it just keeps, there's more and more and more. So yes, I think we should kind of take little pauses now and again, and just kind of look at what's going on in chat, because our chat people are amazing. Let's just say that.
Don't you think it would be good sometimes to, if people are at home and free, for them to come in and tell us the things that they're saying in the chats? I've been thinking that lately.
Have you?
Especially now with this StreamYard system where they can't sabotage it.
Yes, yeah, they can't spike it. Because like...
Oh, sorry, Sasha, sorry, 1 second. I just read Gregory Valentin Animations, the Jehovah's Witness 144. That's in the entirety of Christianity. All Christianity has the Bible. The 144 is in the book of Revelation. It's in the Bible. It's 144 people that will be sealed by the angels and will not suffer the death. So
144,000?
All the sum total of the people who will be saved on earth is 144,000 people. Yeah. According to the Bible, the Jehovah's Witnesses kind of harp on that more, and the vast majority of Christians don't even talk about it, because obviously that's wrong. You know, it's like, nah, There's not quite right. So yeah, everybody else will have the number of the beast, and 144,000 will have the seal from God on their forehead. Well, when the guy comes along and says, "Let me put a seal on your forehead," how are you going to know if that guy's coming from God or from the other guy? You know, say, "Okay, I'm safe because I've got the seals." No, that's the number of the beast. You're dead. No, I just wanted to mention that it's all Christianity, every single Christianity, and yeah, all of the Christianity. 144,000 are saved.
I did not know that. I thought it was limited to, as Gregor Valentine said, the Latter-day Saints, right?
Yes, no, the Jehovah's Witnesses. No. All Christians. So that means out of all the different Christian faiths, 144,000. And the truth is that it's there because of the Jews with the 12 tribes of Judah and 12,000 from each tribe and so on and so forth. It's just part of all of that. I've critiqued it enough in the past. But it is all Christianity. If you're a Christian, go and ask your pastor or your priest about the 144,000.
And I've had a question in chat. Can we please introduce ourselves again? So, Jason, can you introduce yourself again and talk about your channel? And I'm running your YouTube channel name in the little script down below. And Antonio, I'm going to put your channel name as well. What is your channel name today? The Book of the Sun now, right?
Yes, that is my channel permanently now.
So, Persian Scribe. Jason, do you want to just introduce yourself for the people in chat?
Yeah, for the people that have not seen me before, pop up. I think this might be the first time I've been on with you, Sasha. You were on with me on one of my early episodes of the BCNU News Roundtable. But my name's Jason C. Stiles. I'm an author, a fiction author. Maybe someday I'll be like Antonio and throw my efforts towards a nonfiction area of research, but no, I just concentrate on writing fiction. It's my passion, and yeah, my channel is Persian Scribe, all one word, and we have our roundtable shows every so often where I'll have we talk about all sorts of topics, political, technological, some of the types of things we're talking about tonight. So yeah.
Okay. And Antonio, do you want to say a little something?
Yes. First, before I do, there's somebody in the chat. Let me find Rudy Mali Askit in the chat. Okay. This person is banned from my chat, not by me, by I think the Google moderator team, because if they were banned from me, I wouldn't be able to see their comments. So I've just written that there because I've had people asking me to unban them, and they're not in my banned list. This is a Google, by the way, a month, 6 weeks ago, somebody sent me a screen grab of somebody in Germany watching my Hangout, where the Google moderator team in Germany, apparently they're obliged to let people know that they're taking action on my chat. Okay, what happens? Yes. Here in Britain, they don't have to know. You don't see it. I didn't see it. The guy sent me a screen grab of it. Is it all in German? The Google moderator team. So yeah, it's just good because I've been trying to say to people, he's not banned. I've looked at my thing, not banned.
I know, because I still can't see Antonio's comments. If you comment in my chat, I don't even know you're there. Bob from Globebusters, I don't see his. There's a number of people who, if I watch my video from another account or from from my backup account or my other account that has nothing to do with Flat Earth, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I didn't know Antonio and Bob were in my chat. It's really frustrating because you're not in my banned list. In fact, I have you as my moderator and as an approved user, and I still can't see you.
Interesting, huh? So that will have been I mean, this is brilliant, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to get a message to this guy. And I don't even know if he's seeing my comments, you know. I'm just mentioning it now. Hopefully he's also listening. But yeah, this moderator team going around doing dirty ghost banning of people, and then they don't go into your banned list, so you can't unban them. It's just same as when you tried to unban me. I'm not in your list, so you can't.
Yeah, you're not in my list. Like, there's nothing to unban, so it's frustrating.
So my introduction, I'm the Book of the Sun. My name is Antonio Subirats. I live in Britain, not the US. Some God believers think that I live in the US. I live in Britain, and I'm half British. Wrote a book, Book of the Sun, and I have a YouTube channel. Most of you listening in the chat know this, but I like to point things out. Like, for instance, pointing out that the Google moderator team goes around banning people in other people's chats. So in my own chat, banning people without telling me that they have banned, that they have taken action, and I only know this because I happen to have a subscriber in Germany who grabbed the screen grab. They saw it, they grabbed the screen grab and passed it to me. So,
Yeah.
So that's me, by the way, in a nutshell. I talk a lot.
Which I like, as do I, right? So I think it works well. Persian Scribe, Jason, you just have to kind of just cut in because it's hard to get.
Yeah, I love that about you guys, though. Yeah, you notice that with a lot of the really good YouTubers, they have that they just, you turn the mic on and they go and boom, 2-3 hours of material, and that's why I enjoy being a host of a roundtable, so I can, like, you know, throw a topic out there and have other people kind of chime in. I find that interesting, and then I don't have to talk as much. So I'm enjoying this.
Nice. Okay, so chat, some of your questions, but someone had said, I think it might have been Danny Diesel, who has a 100-year-old well on his land, but the access entry point is 20 feet down. So I think that it's interesting when we try to use the sediment layers to figure out how old things are, right? We use the strata and we say, okay, so this was found here, therefore that's a flawed system of aging. And some academics are starting to acknowledge that, right? If you have a landslide, or if you have a mud flood, if you have even, right, there are all kinds of events that can cause these layers to develop. If you have like a super volcano erupts, and then you have a huge ash layer, and there are
if you have a dam built, and
yeah,
then the dam is pulled down, and you don't know there was ever a dam there.
Especially if you don't think humans had the ability to build dams in the area that in the era that you think you're looking at. So you think this strata comes from a natural process, and it would have taken this many thousands of years for this to occur, when in actual fact, no, there was a dam built by these humans maybe 15,000 years ago, and then something happened to that, and then this is as a consequence of that, we're seeing this layer that was laid down maybe in the course of a year, right?
Well, let's face it, if you so somebody builds a dam, everybody leaves their property because it's flooded, and eventually after a while everything goes back to being calm. Now you want to build houses. Where are you going to get bricks from? Well, there's that great big dam wall. You could get the bricks from there. There you go. Dam bricks gone.
Yes. I would like you to talk about some of the, because I think that this is important. I think that the idea that in the past, there have been these cataclysms, and whether or not people believe in the flat earth model and the flat earth theory and the multiple ponds, I think this information is relevant regardless, right? If you believe in the multiple ponds theory, in Antonio's model, and in the image that I used for the thumbnail, and the image behind him over his shoulder, then you can see, like, okay, so the suns, there's something that happens with the suns, and they merge, and all our ancient myths talk about the suns warring with each other. A new sun appears in the sky, it wars with our sun, new suns appear.
Standing still, the sun standing still.
The sun stands still for 3 days. All these stories about suns doing things that we know that our current understanding of the sun can't explain. And so you can either, look into that theory and then say, okay, so then if suns are merging, then that would melt the ice between the different ponds. That would allow civilizations that have had no contact prior to that event to suddenly find each other, maybe go to war, or maybe one of them is so superior that they just take over and they become the gods of these new lands. But even if you don't believe that framework of interpretation of the ideas, even if you just think we live on a globe, then there's still this evidence of these cataclysms, and that they happen on a cyclical calendar, I guess, right? Like they reoccur, they repeat cyclically, and that maybe there's some information that was trying to be passed down through mythology, through cultural traditions, that tie it back to signs that appear in the sky prior to the worst of the cataclysm. And so, and when we look and we find ancient evidence of destruction and ancient evidence of dams, and China in particular, because I'm kind of going off on a tangent, you guys, but I'm going to give you guys a lot to kind of respond to. But so China, they're buying up the United States in the sense that they keep loaning the U.S. money, and then they're taking land as collateral. So when the U.S. defaults on the $1 trillion it owes China, China will own California, Oregon, most of the arable land, farming land in the U.S.
They already own most of the coastlines.
They do.
Of the western coastline.
They own most of the western coastline of the U.S. and of Canada. And China is making huge incursions into Canada. And they've bought up most of Eastern Africa. And apparently, I just learned they're also buying up huge chunks of land in Australia. And so what China seems to be doing, with no one really commenting on it, is they are setting up a backup system. If when this cataclysm ends, if the new places that are safe to live and have land that you can grow crops on, if that happens to be in Africa, the Chinese will be there and they will survive because that land is theirs. If it's Australia, they're good. If it's in Canada, they're good. Anywhere, right? And so
South America, of course.
South America. China's now buying up South America. And so the Chinese, that's their strategy. They don't know where in the world is going to be safe and good after this catastrophe. So they're just hedging their bets. They're just buying up everywhere. And so I would like, Antonio, you had talked about the dams, ancient dams, evidence of ancient dams. I'd like you to talk more about this, because whether people are flat earthers or not, whether they accept your model or an alternative one, I think that this is relevant to them.
Let me pull up, see if I can share the ancient dams.
How do I make it? Oh, damn it. Sorry, guys. I just swore. I'm trying to. How do I make it so that I'm not the one in the. I want it to be your face beside your shared screen, but I don't know if I can do that.
Okay, give me a second. What I'm doing is I'm pulling up Wikipedia, the fountain of knowledge.
Okay.
This one, but they're all.
And I do also, okay, while you're setting that up, I just want to give a little PSA to people about light bulbs. Right now, I'm destroying my skin. I'm aging as we speak because I'm in front of an LED light. So recently, I moved at the end of the summer, and my new place has all these eco-friendly light bulbs. In Canada, it's now illegal to sell or import standard incandescent light bulbs, the tungsten incandescent light bulbs, the regular ones. So now we have to either buy the LED ones or the halogen incandescent, which are different from the old-fashioned tungsten incandescent ones. And so I noticed the other day that I have freckles suddenly appearing. I have freckles all over my arms, and I have freckles appearing on my thighs. My thighs have not seen the sunshine since 2011, so there's no reason for freckles to show up on my upper thighs. And then I realized, because I had read an article years ago about the effects of these new light bulbs, that they're linked to retinal cancer, increased risk of blindness, increased risk of skin cancer, and increased risk of eye cancer. So, and when I had read this, I had made some inquiries and whatever, and then I just felt powerless to change, and you can't really do anything about it. But so when I noticed that I'm getting all these freckles, usually I would have to spend 2 weeks in the sun to get this many freckles on my arms, right? And I realized it's because in my new place, there are all these evil light bulbs. And it's damaging my skin to the point where my skin is creating all these freckles to try to protect my skin. And so I went on Amazon and I ordered these old-fashioned Tesla light bulbs, and I will show you guys a picture of them a little bit later in the show. You have to get the ones that don't have yellow plastic, because some of them are pretending that they're tungsten old-fashioned type of light bulbs, but they're not. They're the halogen incandescents. But because the laws in Canada are such that they can be the old-fashioned tungsten incandescent if it's specifically for a specific appliance that requires that, or if it's like a specialty novelty item, right? And so I bought all these Tesla novelty light bulbs, and number one, it's a beautiful golden light. But number two, it's safer for your eyes and skin. So I would actually recommend that people go and do that. So now that I'm thinking about it so much, I'm going to turn out my LED light, because I'm
go for it.
Yeah. And Antonio, I don't know how to make it so that you're the dominant picture while you share your screen.
I don't know. I'm going to go to share the screen and see what happens. Yes. Here. Are you seeing this?
And Adeline, yes, I am. Okay, Adeline just asked, we have to buy the ones that are, oh, wait, that slipped down on me. Question, we have to buy the ones that are deadly and can be manipulated to spy on us. No, buy the novelty Tesla ones. I'll share the link later. Okay, Antonio, I'm adding your shared screen.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
So what I'm showing is just these ancient dams. Sorry, let me just. So they're ancient dams. The oldest dam is not pictured because it's only like its footprint. But the oldest dam is approximately 5,000 years old, if not older, because the aging system is, well, questionable. But these dams, okay, so especially this one here. Okay, this is it. These dams were built at times when, well, for some reason they thought, oh, we better build a dam. And what we're talking about today is the possibility of people having arrived from elsewhere to say, build dams and build underground cities. The dams are there to give sufficient time to build the underground cities, but also to move the people away from where they're going to die drowned, to help building the underground cities too. So these ancient dams aren't just for no good reason, and there's usually very little talk about them in the mainstream narrative of the world history. Now I will stop screen sharing, and just, you can see my search there, just ancient dam. So wait, stop here. So here's just an idea. Suppose that we're in a pond surrounded by other ponds, and that this situation of a pond surrounded by other ponds has always been the case, will always continue to be the case. But these ponds join, merge, grow until it comes to a point that they diminish. Okay, so there will be a period of growth for however many eons, and then a period of diminishing or becoming smaller for however many eons. No, all of this is great big questions, but the ponds have merged in the past is true. We know because of the races that we have on Earth, the idea that everybody emanated out of Africa and went and became Caucasian and Chinese. No, it doesn't wash, especially because the Aboriginals of Australia do not have the same genes as the Africans. So no, it's not true. The Aboriginals of Australia, who look like Negro Aboriginals, they're not. They are not. They are not the same race as the Central Africans. So we have in the past histories of maps, including Eratosthenes' map of Africa, ending at the Congo. So the first map, the oldest map recognized as a map, was from Eratosthenes, the guy that we're told measured that the Earth was a ball, and that map ended in the Congo. It didn't go to South Africa. It didn't reach South Africa. It ended, and it didn't end how cartographers show that there's more land to be explored, but it remains unexplored. It ended how a region that has been explored ends, as in with an actual line. Now, this was the case. This has been the case. Like Sasha mentioned calendars, the reason that we changed from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar is that the Julian calendar was a recently adopted calendar. Not that it had errors in it. The Julian calendar was relatively recent. It means it was developed at a time when the constellations, when the sky, the sun was doing something different to what it had done before.
Yes.
Before it did one thing, it changed. It did something new. Julius Caesar, the Caesars come, they notice these things, and they start making notes. Now, from time immemorial, the wise men and women have been stargazers, and now they still have the prestige of the astronomers and astronomer or astrophysicist. These people who look at the skies. The Maya built buildings to look at the skies, to point at the skies. They didn't do this for no good reason. They did it to take notes, because when things change to such a point that there's a worldwide calamity, it's first shown in the stars. It's first shown in the constellations. It's first shown in the astral bodies, what we call astral bodies. They behave differently. If time starts changing, and this is something I've posited for a while, if time starts changing, how do you tell if the tick-tock of your clock is still tick-tock, but it's taking just a little bit longer? How do you know? Because your time is based on your tick-tock. How do you know? You can't know. But if there's something that's not running according to the same tick-tock, and that thing is showing a discrepancy, then that's how you're going to know. So that would be the moon. And the Chinese calendar is a moon-based calendar. The moon is not running at the same cycle as the sun. So when the moon starts to show discrepancies, then that would be a good way of saying, okay, well, if we look at our notes, it shows last time there was discrepancies with the moon, it went on to mean this. Perhaps now that the moon is showing the same discrepancies, it will also mean this. Now, this is only conjecture because I haven't looked deeply enough into the moon. This is recent to me. This is recent news. But the moon had this 4-month cycle of 30 days between each full moon, which it's not normal. But the moon, according to cosmology, has this 18.6 year cycle of the ecliptic from the point where in the ecliptic, the point where the moon is at its highest point here, it goes down and then it comes back up to the highest point. At this point, it does it cycling around the Earth. This shifting of the ecliptic plane.
Yeah, Chaco Canyon in the United States, the structures at Chaco Canyon are built such that they actually track that 18-point-something-year cycle of the moon.
Yeah, so the reason these guys tracked these things, it's not just that it's an interesting thing to do. It's a very difficult thing to do. More than difficult, it's difficult to convince the guys that run the show to give you the funds and the manpower to build structures to observe them. It's not like the spoiled child says, I want to look at the moon. It's like, no, you have to explain why it's important. So when they explain, look, it's important because this is how we will know. Now, recently, the cosmologists have started to say, oh, we've got to the point, quite critical, that we don't actually know how old the universe is. According to their own cosmology, they don't know. So they don't know how long, they have guesses to how long the sun will live, okay? In their cosmology, which means the sun, it will have a lifespan of approximately these many millions of years, and from then on, it will go to supernova, or it will become a dwarf star. Various different possibilities, but life will no longer be tenable on Earth. So we need to move to somewhere else where we can live before that happens.
Yes.
This is based on the age of the sun. But if they now find that the age of the universe is different, then the age of the sun is also different. And it could turn out that it's much older and much closer to its death date that they have estimated. This whole idea of the death date doesn't come from no good reason. It comes from looking back at history and explanations of the sun doing strange things. So the cosmologists go and look at the sun, and they go and look at the constellations, and it all comes down to the sun is going to behave more erratically. It's going to have a bigger dissonance with the model of the cosmology. This dissonance is going to get to the point where they already now, when it starts happening, the cosmologists will be able to say, well, we've been saying for the last couple of years there's something weird going on. Which is the situation. They've been saying it for the last few years. There's something strange going on. Now they can hold their hands up and say, we told you there was something strange. And the idea that there are other ponds where people come from and go back to, like for instance the Maya or the Kemet or the Maori coming from. So the idea, the globe Earth idea is everybody came from Africa, but some of them became Maori, okay, and Polynesian people. Then they went to Hawaii and they went to Easter Island. And never mind those statues in Easter Island. Never mind that. And they if you listen to the Maori, they know where they came from, and they say where they came from. They came looking for the sun.
Yes.
Looking for the sun. If you live in Africa, you know where the sun is. What the heck? So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, is that there are these elements in these people's traditions that talk about arriving at this land that they're now residing in because they're chasing the sun. And when you look at where they are, that doesn't make sense in the standard model. It does make sense when you talk about these different ponds and the different suns that rule over them and then merge. I want to mention that Hugh Yarts, please let me know how you pronounce your last name. He was saying Stonehenge also encodes the 18-point-something year cycle of the moon. And there was someone else that said something in chat that I wanted to read out. Angel of Fire 451 is wishing that we were also talking about yin, not just the yang, that we were talking about the energies and spirit, not just the technical and the tangible, I suppose. Persian Scribe, I'm going to ask for your input in a moment because you've been a bit quiet. But I just wanted to, so, and also for the two of you, if there's some comment in chat that you think we should really kind of address, then do feel free to do so. And yes, Antonio, something that I want to emphasize in what you just said is there do seem to be changes in lunar activity. And I think that we should all, as a flat Earth community, I know people hate when I say that, but I'm saying it. Maybe it's a good time to start paying attention on what the moon is doing and tracking it ourselves so that we can see, is it deviating from the cycles that we have been taught are immutable. One of the things with the moon cycles, which is interesting, is although we know about the 18-point-something year cycle, the 29-point-something day month, and the moon has the two. There's the 29.7, I think, and then the 27.3, I think, day cycles. But there's the notation of the moon that they talk about, where like the surface of the moon that we see is kind of changes, and that's one that they're not quite able to figure out what the cycle is. And I think that that's interesting with all the modeling software, with all, I guess, the knowledge that we're supposed to have about these things. And there are still some cycles that they can't quite figure out. Someone had asked a question and I wanted to address it. I think they were offering help if we want some help in doing observations. Oh, Coriolis, Zero Coriolis, in fact, Flat is offering up his time and energy if we need help tracking, I guess, maybe lunar cycles or things like that. So that's usually something that Antonio does with his tracking the sun. But Persian Scribe, where are you at with all of this?
Could you be a little bit more specific? Because I'm fearing that there's going to be a quiz at the end of this, and I'm kind of math challenged. So
Oh, like the quiz starts now.
epicycles. Oh no, epicycles, not that. Oh.
I know. Just feel free to react to whatever it is that you're kind of thinking about in response to what we've been talking about in the last 2 minutes, or to someone in chat.
Well, I was going to bring up something that was being talked about a little bit a few minutes ago in chat, and I saw on, I forget what show it was, and yes, it was on brainwashing TV, but but it was I think it was Rami Romani, the archaeologist from Egypt, and Zahi Hawass, our favorite Egyptologist, and Giorgio Tsoukalos. So it might have been Ancient Aliens, actually.
Okay.
And so they're, or one of the offshoot shows, In Search of Aliens or something like that, that Giorgio does. And they're talking about, they're showing Christopher Dunn, who wrote the book about the Great Pyramid being essentially a machine. And so there's been evidence of hydrated zinc found in the Queen's Chamber, I believe. And so if you combine hydrochloric acid and hydrated zinc, you create that, that creates a gas that can be ignited for lighting. And there's a lot of evidence of burn marks inside the chambers in the Great Pyramid. And so I thought that was a pretty interesting topic that I just saw in chat, and I had to mention it. And so, yeah.
I do think it's interesting. I was doing a lot of research when I was working on a recent project sitting behind me here. Some of the research that I was doing was on the pyramid power. And it sounds so ridiculous and absurd. But the thing is, there's actually a lot of evidence for interesting effects, not just based on the pyramids themselves, but the pyramidal shape and how shapes seem to interact with, for the sake of argument, just for now, let's just say the ether, to have all these very interesting effects. But you mentioned the hydrated zinc, because there was a researcher and he did a presentation about this. You can find it on YouTube. And he built a little pyramid just out of wire of some kind, but he suspended a piece of zinc at the central point in the pyramid. And he noticed that it changed into, so he kept kind of testing it for different things. It turned into calcium, and then it just kind of disintegrated, and the dust, the powder fell from the wire that it was suspended from. So I thought that was interesting. And he has this theory about so the electrons are being concentrated in this area, and they were smacking into the zinc particles, and then it turned the zinc into calcium. And I don't know that that's actually the correct explanation, but what I do find interesting is this idea that these are effects. You might not want to be a human being standing in that point. So I think that there's a danger in buying into things without knowing enough about them. So pyramid power, there's some magical effect and it affects the ether. So I'm going to build a pyramid and stand in the center of it, and somehow that'll be a good experience. Well, it might not. It might kill you, right? And that's what happened in Russia, where they built all these pyramids with different angles, and for healing effects, and some of them have amazing healing effects, and then some of them induce massive headaches and migraines and cause nausea. And so it really, to me, shows that it's not the placebo effect, and it's not just that pyramids are somehow magical. It's that there's something about the shape that either concentrates the ether, whatever the ether is, and in ways that can be beneficial but can be harmful. And I think that that's important to realize, that I think it's really easy to think that anything mystical is definitely for human good, but I think it's neutral in a lot of cases. I'm going to let Antonio say something about this.
Okay, so the Chinese have feng shui. The Chinese build buildings in city centers with a purpose. So how the buildings are angled, their surfaces, how those surfaces are angled, what they point to, what they do not point to. Architects have known about this for a long time. There are energies there. in a more brute way, there's a place in Britain where there's a building it's clad in glass, and there's a region of the street across from this building where you sunburn in the winter when you stand there because of the sun. So, and that's, like I said, it's more of a brute example. If you look at Grebennikov, what Sandra was talking about, okay, so there's the book by Grebennikov, My Life. Grebennikov was this crackpot Russian scientist who was really an observant genius. I mentioned this earlier in my own Hangouts, how if you think you know everything, you're not going to see things even when they're right there in front of you. But if instead you have an open mind and are ready to notice things, you will notice. For instance, if you go and you're camping, and it's a lovely night, and you lie down and you start to get a headache, you might just assume that you're just, well, getting a headache. But you might, like him, think, why have I got a headache now? And move and find that your headache gets better and go back and go, that's weird, got a headache here, but not here. And keep checking and notice that the reason you've got a headache is that you're above a honeycomb. And you move over here and you don't have the headache. And anyway, the point is, he discovered an effect caused by the honeycomb shape. He discovered an effect. This effect has already been named. So it's not that he discovered that this was an element that had an effect. He discovered an effect that it has. But the thing that he was experimenting with already had a name.
What was the name of it?
I'm trying to find the thing, and I can't find it right now.
The chapter?
Yeah. Yes. I don't know.
I just want to interject something quick. And Falconelli talked about, he was a mysterious author from the last century, and he wrote the book about the mysteries of the great cathedrals, the Gothic cathedrals in Europe.
Oh, yes.
And the Immortals.
Right. And he talked about the angle of sorrow being 90 degrees. So that would equate to the cubes and squares. That's like the idea of the profane use that angle a lot in their architecture. The angle of sorrow, 90-degree angles. But the angle of joy is 60 degrees, which is the equitriangle, like in pyramids. So
an equilateral triangle. Okay, This is fascinating that you say that, because I do remember because when I was studying, I was looking at how to design environments to elicit more moral behavior when I was studying psych. That was one of my things. And one of the things that I had come across that I found was very interesting is that when you're in an environment, a space that has exactly what you're saying, they're 90-degree corners, your cortisol levels, so your stress hormone, is higher than when you're in a space that doesn't have 90-degree, either like in a round room, hexagonal room, or obviously if you're outside and there's really aren't a lot of 90-degree angles, but then there are confounding factors with being outside. But if you just look at the room, so basically the 90-degree corners, just that increases your stress hormone levels. And so I think that's interesting that Falconelli had found that without doing experiments on large groups of people. And that's the thing, a lot of the esoteric wisdom, it's actually borne out by more recent experiments. And that's one, like, I always think, and it's kind of sad and pathetic, but I always think, like, when I'm successful, which, it hasn't happened yet. When I'm successful, one of the things that I want to do is to be able to have my house built for me such that all the rooms are either round rooms or maybe octagonal rooms, but that there aren't all these square boxes. And I think that the fact that when people work in offices, they typically have cubicles. So that 90-degree angle, you're seeing that right in front of your face. You're always in this environment that's not healthy for us.
I've always thought, just on a personal note, right angles on the inside of a building especially, they are such a waste. Like, every single corner in any room that we have, it's like, well, what's that corner doing? It's collect. spider webs are saying, forget that corner. Here's a spider web. Okay, this is the end. Like, forget that. Forget it. And the spider web is there because it's a convenient place for the spider web to be. Why? Because there's a motion of the air. The mosquito, its food is going to travel in that direction. It doesn't make it in the tiny little corner of your building because it's not going to go there. So what are corners for? They're simply taking up space. They're just convenient, like straight on. And it's not a bright idea. Like, in no way is having corners in your room an actual bright idea. It doesn't help anything. It doesn't create a better airflow. It doesn't help illumination. It doesn't do anything at all good. But we all have them, and we go by without really noticing. And then when you talk to somebody who knows these things, like Schauberger, who would actually say that, like, you need to flow. You need things to flow. And then you go to the Chinese, and they're like, oh yeah, we've got a whole art. It's thousands of years old about things flowing, and and then you have people, like the guy you're discussing, who's looked at these things and gone, my gosh, this is so simple and so clear to see. And the majority of the world don't. They just don't notice. So just wanted to say that. Guys, listen, I'm going to have to bail because it's almost 3:15 here. So if you don't mind.
Can you tell us about Gramanikov first? Can you share that information? Even though, like, I wasn't sure if I want, so for the audience, I came across this stuff while I was researching my project, Gramanikov, and so I sent the chapter of the book to Antonio because it's kind of in the realm of his interests.
Very much so.
Yes, but it's funny because I do have this sense of like, ooh, I don't know if we should be sharing this publicly. It's interesting that I do often kind of have this sense of, I kind of want to start a secret society so that the information that I come across, I can share with people, but that it's vetted, because I think that there are two concerns that I have, Antonio. Number one, being shut down because we share information that they don't want getting to the masses. And number two, so many trolls, right, watch our channels. And some of the things we talk about are powerful. And I don't know that we should be giving that to the trolls. And also, I don't know that I want to bring to their attention these types of topics, not even because they can do something with it, but just, I don't know if I want to bring their maleficent focus onto these topics.
They're negative yin. They're negative yin.
They're negative yin. There we go. And so I do kind of think that, like you, I have this urge to share these things that I find because it's wondrous. But I think what we should do is, I think we should start a secret society so that we can vet people. And
well,
then
right now, sorry, Sasha, right now in this secret society, there's at least 3 of us, okay? And we have to make sure we don't tell anyone about it, okay? Jason, you, me, we're all thrown to it. And
no, but like, you think that I'm joking and I'm being funny, but you guys, in fact,
oh, I know. Yes, it makes. Do you know what? When you look at the secret societies of the world, they say, "Oh, secret society must be evil, must be killing children." Like, or they don't want you interfering with them. They're not evil and they're not killing children, and you just go around saying that they're evil and kill children, which proved what they were saying was right. That you're just a waste of time and you can't even think straight.
You don't even have to create a secret society with meetings and secret passcodes and whatnot, and secretive meetings in mansions or whatever.
Ritual.
Basically, just be like Antonio and I, and write a book and plow all your research into the book, and people don't read nowadays, so they just they look at Facebook memes and Baby Yoda and and cat videos and whatnot. So
there are baddies that read, though, and they're the ones that I'm actually concerned about. I'm not, because the people that don't read, they don't have the ability to focus their attention enough to bring any negative effects about. But it's people like IPS, who is that Flat Earth Luciferian. He reads, and he's a maleficent Luciferian, right? And so it's those people, and there are a lot of them, and they're monitoring our community. And so those are the ones that I worry about. So what I guess I'm saying is, secretly, you guys, I'm starting a secret society. And I will be having vetting, I don't know, some kind of vetting interviews in 2020. I'll have some kind of an audition process.
Well, this is what I'm going to say now is the kind of thing that paints me as a bad person. But maybe find a way of weaving a spell so that if anybody wants to do anything like negative with it, suddenly they come out with warts. You know, something. I don't know. He's talking about witchcraft. So yeah. Anyway, you can embed things. You can embed. So listen, guys, I'm going to have to go. I need the toilet, but also I need to wrap up. I'm going to carry on listening to you guys if you don't mind. Well, if you don't mind. Sure. And if you mind, I'm going to do so anyway. Well, I'm not going to.
Okay, and I would like to talk to you, I guess, tomorrow, Antonio.
Yes, we will talk.
Later, but tomorrow.
We'll talk. And you and me will talk as well, Jason. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Take it easy, Antonio.
Will do. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for being here, Antonio.
You're welcome. Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Bye. Okay, so it's funny because Antonio kind of initiated the stream. He kind of contacted me and said, hey, let's talk about these underground bases and these ancient dams and this evidence that this cataclysm has happened in the past. And now it looks like the militaries of the world are preparing for it to happen again. And we just kind of touched on it, and then we went kind of all over. And I was hoping to bring it back to that before the end of the stream, but it's so late over there for him. It's what is it, 3 a.m, maybe, I think, for him. So sorry, Antonio. So Persian Scribe, tell me a little bit about how you, I guess, the context of the ancient civilizations that you talk about in your book.
Right. I mean, I think it goes back to my fascination with all these sorts of subjects going, in my childhood. Leonard Nimoy's In Search Of show, and that was probably one of the beginning points. And so I've always been fascinated by ancient civilizations, learning as much as I could about the Greeks and Egyptians, and that's a lifelong pursuit. I mean, because there's just a vast array of things you have to kind of absorb. And again, you have to have discernment too, as to a lot of the things that, this happens with a lot of philosophers throughout the centuries, that the philosophers you hear about are the ones that kind of promote the prevailing narrative that is being pushed by the ruling classes, the aristocracy. In fact, I just kind of on that subject, I just purchased a book by Walter Bosley. I don't know if you guys can see that. It's called The Esoteric Napoleon. And so I would highly suggest people checking out Walter Bosley's channel, his YouTube channel. He usually streams on Sunday nights.
Do you want to share that again? I've just kind of zoomed in on us.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
The Esoteric Napoleon by Walter Bosley.
Nice.
And so I haven't, finished reading it yet, but what it talks about is kind of the history being lies agreed upon, where everyone has this notion of Napoleon. He's become kind of a laughing stock in the 21st century mind. There's been so much anti-Napoleon propaganda throughout the years, especially in the Occident, where we've received a lot of British propaganda about Napoleon. And he was really kind of tying back into my fascination with the Greeks and Hellenistic period. Napoleon really, there's a lot of criticism towards Platonic thought, Neoplatonic thought, especially by a lot of the Orthodox Christian community. their criticisms of the Catholic Church and how it absorbed through Thomas Aquinas a lot of Neoplatonic thought. But Napoleon kind of liked the idea of getting rid of the European feudal system and the aristocracy, and he liked the idea of there being a philosopher king kind of concept, and he really was very into science and learning about ancient civilizations himself, and that's what prompted his trip to Egypt and he took a whole team of scientists and people to Egypt to learn more about what the ancients knew. And so, yeah, I think those are the sorts of things that kind of got me into, some of the things I incorporated in my first novel. Some of the stuff I'll be incorporating in future novels is just the idea of, I've always been into like kind of topics like Graham Hancock brings up, where we know the mainstream kind of notion of who we are and where we come from, and that story's been told, but has it really been told? How much has been left out? And so I think that's kind of where I'm at. I absorb a lot of this stuff. A lot of it is disinfo, and you have to weed through a lot. Discernment is kind of always being put to the test. So I don't know. Like, what do you like? What's your idea of Napoleon and some of these quote unquote tyrants throughout history? Do you think that we'll ever get to the bottom of what the true story was behind some of these things? I mean, like if you're thinking about Carthago delenda est, for example, Carthage must be destroyed. It goes back to the Punic Wars, where there's all this propaganda about the enemy. So we have to wade through that. We always have to. I as an author, I'm always putting myself in the mindset of different characters and how they would see things and how they would approach things. So I'm always looking at these topics with, looking at it from a 360 point of view. So I don't know. I'm kind of rambling.
I know. What do I think about historical figures? I think that we have to trust the people who have the power, I guess, to determine what we're taught, that what they tell us about historical figures is accurate. And we all know the adage that it's the winners of the war that go on to write the history of that war, and they decide who won, they decide who the enemy was, who the bad guy was, right? And so I think that we do have to, when we're looking at historical figures, we do have to take into account that this is a distorted view. And I think when we go back beyond a certain point, we have to take into consideration that this may actually not be a real historical figure. This may be a myth based on several people, or
Right.
based on not even based on people, maybe based on stories of their gods, or some of their other mythological characters, right, that were designed to teach moral lessons. And so I think that if you take that into consideration, then how you evaluate the truth of, like, did this figure live? Well, I think what's more important is, what is the meaning that we're supposed to learn from the story of this person's life? And is that meaning useful to me? And what are the underlying implications of me accepting that meaning, right? I think that I was talking to John LeBon about Nikola Tesla last night, whether he's a real person, whether he existed, whether he is the person that we think he is, right? The hero of the fringe conspiracy theory community, right? The lone wolf, just like us, but brilliant and misunderstood and unlucky in love and all these things, right?
Right.
and oppressed, right? Like, oh, the Nobel Prize was not given to him, but he deserved to be recognized. And then you find out actually it was given to him, but he was too bloody stubborn and too proud to share it with someone. And so it was rescinded. And so, like, that's the thing. So whether he was the man that we tell ourselves that he is, because it helps us to feel maybe more validated, or maybe we feel like, okay, so if he could be that hero, I can be that hero. If you're using that story to make yourself a better contributor to the world, that's good. If you're using it to craft a narrative for your life that's not good for you, if you use it to isolate yourself more, right? You know, Tesla was a lone wolf and he didn't need anyone, and either do I. Well, that's probably not as healthy. One of the things that about the story of Nikola Tesla is that you can see that if this character or person had been more flexible and had worked with people better, he could have accomplished so much more, and he could have contributed so much more of his brilliance to the world. And a lot of his brilliance was stunted, and a lot of his ideas he wasn't able to develop, and he wasn't able to contribute because he didn't work with the people that he could have worked with and needed to work with.
Right. You know, theory versus, you know, real world application.
Yeah, like I think of I have a list and all, I have hundreds of text files in a folder, in my Orphan Red folder, for video ideas. Some of them are brilliant and some of them are insightful, and I never get to them. And I think, you know, if I am struck by a vehicle as I go out later tonight and then I die, all these ideas that I had that might have inspired you to do something with that idea, they're gone. They're bricked. My laptop is gone. I'm gone, and those ideas are gone. And why? Because I was too distracted watching other things instead of making my own things, or because I was too depressed to actually make a video. You know, like whatever it is that's holding me back. And so I think that that's the thing, is that it's really easy to convince ourselves that that's all okay because we'll do it later, we'll do it tomorrow, we'll do it when people help us, or when the world is kinder, more deserving, or when we're not the victim of whatever it is, right? But that's the thing, right? And I think that applies to Tesla as well. You're not hurting just, like, it's not just unfair to you, it's unfair to the world, right? And he thought, like, he declined the Nobel Prize because they wanted him to share it with Edison. And he was too proud and he was too vindictive and he didn't want Edison to get it, right? And it's like, you know what? Be a nicer person, and you could have gotten it, and then you would have gotten more funding for your next experiment, and maybe you would have built something incredible for the world. But instead, you were petty, and, you know, right. And so that's the thing. So I think, so when I think about these characters that you say, like Napoleon, let's say, did he exist? Did he not? What did he do? What the story that all these stories that were told about him? I think what matters less is whether he existed in the way that we're told, but what matters more is what's the meaning that we make of that, and how does it affect how we live our lives?
Right. I mean, I think with all these historical figures, I mean, well, what you were talking about before, actualizing your ideas. I think in the West, we have the founding fathers here in America really had held up the idea of checks and balances between what government could do to the people, and kind of they held to the notion that individualism, rugged individualism, was kind of a concept in the 1800s, 1700s of having the individual have more value than it had been given in previous centuries. So, but at the same time, what you had with coming out of the French Revolution and Robespierre and just alt-right revolution and just people, the mob basically ruling over society, the dangers of that of individualism is just feeling like it empowers people just to do whatever and not take in consideration the rest of the people in your group, in your larger collective.
Yes.
So there's dangers. I mean, Tesla, he was an actual self-actualized person if we believe the stories that we've been told about him, and his rivalries that he had with, various people. And so he tried to go his own way, and yeah, I mean, kind of like the idea of what Napoleon was getting at was he had a vision. He had an idea of how he wanted to spend his time and spend his day in the discipline of applying his ideas that he channeled from the ether, basically. And so, yeah, I think there's always a balance, and there's a danger in being a society that's too dependent on the individual, because there's the pitfalls of just total revolutions. Sociopaths and psychopaths are a real thing. But at the same time, coming out of the Enlightenment, coming out of the scientific, I mean, this is kind of a little bit off subject, but I was thinking about all these topics that we talk about. One reason why I always kind of hesitate to come on and talk about some of these subjects is because I feel so inadequate. Because to properly talk about just one topic, let's take the energy essence distinction in the Catholicism versus Orthodox kind of world. You need to read 20 or 30 years of patristic, tomes, huge tomes, to even properly discuss what was going on with the ecumenical councils in the first 7 centuries. And so, yeah, I mean, there's certain people out there that have devoted their lives to talk about one specific little topic. And with all these things, you have thousands of years of apologetics and academia piled on top of one another to flesh these subjects out to the point where we're at now, where where you learn something in your little short time span at college, and that you're just kind of given the cliff notes, basically. But I just find that unacceptable. I think it's great to suffer a lot of ego deaths along the way on your path of learning, and realizing, wow, I just don't know about this. And that's why I'm kind of compassionate towards people that don't know what the hell I'm talking about half the time. If I bring up perennialism, what the hell is he talking about? I mean, but it's like, yeah, it's something I've come across, and maybe me just mentioning it, people will look into it, and it'll get them going a little farther down their path. That's the balance you're always trying to, kind of strike. I mean, Tartaria, that whole subject of mud floods in Tartaria, it kind of rubs me, it kind of triggers me sometimes, because I know that these people, a lot of these researchers are kind of on the right track as far as okay, let's re-examine some of these sites. Let's re-examine some of these buildings. Let's look at some of these maps, and have we really been told the truth about it? But at the same time, they're not accepting the fact that maybe they're ignoring tons of texts and architectural plans and blah 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 that are out there and buried under inches of dust, and city city council buildings or whatever. I stumbled across something interesting the other day, whereas there was a debate going on about a building in the Chicago area, and I found a commenter, and he was talking about he was an architect from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and he was throwing up all these links to check out archives and .gov sites and whatnot, where they kept a lot of this information about old plans for the buildings or whatever. And he's trying to, and then he was like, "Oh, you're a disinfo agent." He because he wasn't totally buying into the whole idea that this was a Tartarian building or whatever. So, I mean, in each of these topics, there's always like a rush to kind of come to conclusions. And there's so many logical fallacies, traps that people can fall into. And you really have to do, I mean, just watching a couple YouTube videos, it's not going to really be good enough to learn about some of these subjects. And I'm sure, with you being more immersed in academia, I haven't been in academia, that world, for a few years since, I graduated college, but you know how that mindset is there, where I think there needs to be more rigor put into the research.
So 2 things I want to say about that. One, I think it's not just, like, I think you're not wrong, but it's not just the lack of rigor in the research. I think it's that our understanding of what statistical analysis can do and is, and what meanings we can derive from it are completely wrong. I don't think people really understand what that's all about. Someday, perhaps, I'll do a video about this. And like, now we're introducing Bayesian stats, which is even worse. But like, I really don't think people understand what statistics are about and how they work and why they don't do what we think that they do. You have to operationalize your definitions so that you are actually measuring what you think you're measuring. But then you also have to make assumptions that what matters is the average rather than the individual data points, right? And then you're comparing averages. There are all these problems with that whole system of thinking. And it's revealed by the fact that, most studies can't be replicated. Most published findings, when they replicate it, they don't see the same result, even if the initial one had very strong effect sizes, right? And so it proves like there's a problem there. And even just the placebo effect, the fact that most drugs are not actually significant, like they're statistically significantly more effective than the placebo. But what does that mean? What does it mean that there's a 0.05 probability that they're from the one distribution where that is a legitimate effect, rather than that data coming from a population of data points where it's not an effect? Like, when people don't think about, well, what does that actually mean? And even the people that think about what it actually means, they accept these assumptions about why it's okay to dismiss the notions that we're not measuring what we think we're measuring, that the effects don't come from a population where that is actually a real effect, right? And we see that if you can't even explain how the placebo effect works, then what does it mean that your drug is slightly more effective than the placebo effect? Like, what does that even mean? If you don't know how people are magically either healing themselves or they're magically exhibiting side effects that happen to be exactly the same as the side effects of people who are taking the drug, even though you're just taking a sugar pill. What does it mean? So then if the people on the actual drug are getting beneficial effects that are better than your magical beneficial effects, well, what does that mean? We think that means that the drug is actually something good and it works and we should give it to all these people. But I think that that's naive. And the only reason we keep going forward with that ideology is because pharma is making money out of it. So I think it's not just that there's insufficient rigor and there's corruption and there are too many stupid people in academia who just work really hard and that's how they get there. I think it's a bigger problem in terms of how we understand reality and our analysis of it. But I know I'm talking a lot right now, sorry, but I wanted to bring us back to something that Antonio pointed out earlier about simulation theory that he dislikes about it, but that I like about it. In that it brings you to a point of absurdity. If you can't know anything about the programmer of the simulation you're in, then is there any point in trying to think about this reality as a simulation with a programmer who has intentions and goals, right? If you can never know anything about him because you have no way of accessing information about him, then is there any point thinking about it in that way? I think that there is, right? And that's what I would say to you in terms of these Tartaria. Whether Tartaria existed the way that the conspiracy theories about it claim or not, I think that there's use in thinking about it in those terms and doing the research, even if the maps are fabrications by the Freemasons 120 years ago, right? Like, I still think that there's value because there was meaning that was being imbued there. The people who created this information created it for a purpose, maybe to deceive the masses, but you can learn about the nature of the deception by finding out more about the deception itself, right? So I think it's not a waste of time to look into these things.
Yeah, I agree. I think something I've noticed, and this is more of a sociological observation on YouTube, is that, okay, we have thousands and thousands of YouTube channels and thousands of I mean, the internet is just vast beyond comprehension. And so I think what happens is things get very tribalized on various channels, and everyone's kind of has their little have their favorite people that they like to listen to, and their little pet theories that they glom onto. And something I've noticed is when I'm very much a scavenger of information. I love soaking up as much as I can within reason. If I find out about a channel and they're talking about something, like I mentioned, Praveen Mohan's Phenomenal Travel Videos channel, and he's actually going to some of these various sites in India, and it's an opportunity when you watch a channel like that to see things. Unless I spent thousands of dollars to go over there myself, it's an opportunity to sitting here in the ice station, upper Midwest of America, to see places and things and buildings and etc. that I'd never be able to see in real life. So that there's a value to that, and I get a lot out of those types of things. Now, drawing conclusions, taking in information and absorbing it and all that's one thing. But then I noticed there's that trap that a lot of people fall into, is they watch some of these things and then they immediately come to jump to conclusions, and I think
truth wholeheartedly.
Right. And I find myself more and more I look into things that the more and more I have to peel away the layers of what are my presuppositions, what are the foundational underpinnings of my worldview. And the more time I'm on this planet, the more I realize, wow, my worldview was, like I said earlier, was kind of molded and shaped by the influences of my mom, and she was interested in a lot of really interesting topics, and it was influenced by what I was exposed to in public school, and it was influenced by what I saw on TV and some of the entertainment, and I think that's I'm no different than anyone else. But once you get to a certain point, I feel like where I'm at now, and it's like I've read so much in the last 5-10 years that kind of shakes what I previously thought. And so I just feel like if I was going to start a church or a cult, it'd be called the Church of IDK, the Church of I don't know. I've really just, like I said before, I'm just peeling away layers and layers, trying to get at these presuppositions. Because even the people that have devoted themselves to studying these ancient cultures, studying the works of Plotinus and getting back to people way back thousands of years, those people were, what were their worldviews? What were their presuppositions that they were operating on? We barely understand the cultures that they were immersed in. So it's like, yeah, I feel that skews a lot of people, and people have their security blankets that they hold fast to, that being their their the Holy Bible or the Quran or a text from their, a Hindu text or a Chinese philosopher. These things are people really want, once they find something that resonates with them, it's very difficult to get them to look at those sources of information objectively, because we're very much metaphysical creatures. We're not just existing here physically in the, as Ken Wheeler says, the cult of bumping particles. We're not just, interacting with the physical environment. We really are more than that, I believe. And again, that's my own personal belief. So where is that coming from? Where's that presupposition? Where's that worldview coming from? So I this bounce it back to you.
So I think, yes, I think that basically what we're saying is you should always keep a critical mind, and when you think you found the truth, don't be a zealot of it, because you may find that in 3 to 5 years that truth might change a little bit with new information. I think that that's the key, right? Is always be aware that it's not knowledge of truth that we have as human beings, it's beliefs that we've found the truth. That's what I really am I think that this is what I'm settling on. I don't know that there is any such thing as having knowledge. I think it's having belief about the world and about how things are and how things work, right? So before we wrap up, let's take a few comments or questions from chat.
Yeah, I was just going to screen share something quick that kind of tied into, let's see here. Let me see. Hopefully this works.
Harmon Walker, thank you so much, by the way. I'm going to make a little end of year thank you video for my patrons, my supporters, my subscribers, my super chatters, to show appreciation. So yes, but I just wanted to sneak that little thank you in today. So I'll leave the rest of that for the next video. Okay, I will add this to the shared screen. And hello, Isengar.
And if this isn't working, then I'm not sure. It's the first time I've used this browser, and I'm not sure if this is working right. It's working? Yes. You see the caverns, dungeons, and labyrinths?
Yeah.
So this kind of ties into what we were talking about earlier, and I posted the link to this in the private chat part, Sasha. So if you want to share it later with everyone, that'd be, if you want. But there's a
share that in chat.
If you want. I mean, it's just a random page I found, but there's like a whole ton of really interesting. If people are, there's a lot of like wacky things mixed in here, and I haven't had a chance to actually look at this totally myself. But
can
there's
you
a
tell us about what it is, because the text is really small on the shared screen. So can you maybe just instead of just showing us, can you just give us a summary? Tell us a little bit about it. Let's do that.
Okay, so basically, this is the story I wanted to share. This comes from the October 1947 issue of Amazing Stories, and it's from page 171 to 172. And basically, and I mentioned national parks. This is a story about Big Bend National Park. Okay. And again, it's from October 1947. So there's a story where these guys were out hunting, in this canyon in the Big Bend National Park area. Norman Finley and this other gentleman, they were, again, like hunting or whatever. So I'll read some of this. They're at the foot of the Del Norte Mountains, 4,000 feet high, and they were hunting deer but had no luck. Just as they were about to call it a day, Finley spotted a mountain lion. He snapped a shot at it and knocked it over, but the lion, it rolled over on its feet, and I guess it was bleeding and whatnot. And I'm trying to do a short Cliff Notes version of the story.
Yeah, it's just so that we get the basic sense of what it is.
So basically, they were quite a ways away from so they're tracking it, as it was bleeding, and it kind of tried to escape and got away from them, and they were tracking the blood on the ground. Yeah. And so the mountain lion led them to this cave. And again, this is in the Big Bend National Park. And so the cave, and I'm reading from the article here, the cave was one of those dished out affairs that are so common in the Southwest, eroded out of the face of a cliff and cup-shaped. The only access to it was by that trail, but this cave was a bit queer. It had a sand floor and was just about big enough to park 20 cars in it. On the cliff edge was a low stone wall. This in itself was not too unusual because such caves have sheltered Indians for thousands of years, kind of like what Antonio was talking about. The thing that did make it unusual was that in the rear of it was a perfectly round hole. Now, I saw a TV show talking about this case, and they showed it's just like a perfectly drilled round hole. Granted, okay, this is 1947, mind you. So kind
of like what we see at Pumapunku, we see that these very hard stones have these perfectly drilled holes in them. So they found this also here.
So they found this. They went into this cave, and they're deep back into the back of this cave. They found this in the wall, perfectly drilled round hole. And so they approached it rather cautiously and tossed some stones in it to see if they could find the mountain lion, if he crawled in there or something. There's no response, but they could hear the stones rolling and bouncing down an incline, and the sound got fainter and fainter. So the long story short is, this was a cave where these guys claim that they could go back to it and find it no problem. And it's just one of those open-ended stories where it's like, okay, this is an account from a couple guys back in the 1940s. It was published, and it's just one of those things that gets lost in time. And so this cave and this hole could be out there as evidence of some type of ancient technology that was used to drill a hole in this cave. I just thought it's kind of an interesting story that I could bring up to kind of bring it back to what we were talking about at the beginning.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing, right? I think it's interesting that there is this evidence, but I think that in terms of this story, like, I think we have Pumapunku, which is a bit of a tourist site now, as I understand it, right? And there's evidence there of drilling. And even in Egypt, in some of the temples there's evidence of drilling, and that's there, and it's on display, and there are tourists that go, and nobody cares. Like, people don't, it hasn't impacted the mainstream ideas about ancient art history, about ancient history of technology. It hasn't made the mainstream, the masses, question how does this actually work, and how does our understanding of history work with this evidence of advanced technology. So now when we read these findings of secret sites that also show this, I mean, I think it's interesting, definitely, to know that these things are everywhere. But I think it's interesting, or annoying, I suppose, frustrating, that we don't even have to go and find these reports of these lesser known ones, because even the ones that are just sitting there right in front of the tourist entrance, people aren't caring about. They're not paying attention to. They're not convinced by it, that that's something that they need to integrate into their worldview, right? So I think that the people who are interested by it, who are in the conspiracy theory world, who are trying to make sense of it, we're already here. The masses don't care. They're not going to. And I think that that's the point that we were making earlier, which is that even if some of the information in the conspiracy theory world is wrong, the fact that we're here looking and trying to make sense of it has value, because the truth is certainly not coming out of academia, and it won't, because it attracts the kinds of people that are in the mainstream, right? So we do have that moral obligation to do more work ourselves in finding the truth and sharing it amongst ourselves, I suppose, right? And creating secret societies where maybe some people from the masses are allowed into the lower tiers. As long as they can prove that they're not NPCs. Yep. Okay, so before we go, if there are last things in chat that you want to respond to, this is the time to do it. People in chat, it's the time. I know there's a delay, so I will give you guys a little bit longer, but then we're gonna go because I'm a little bit tired because I did such a long hangout with John yesterday. It was fantastic, but it was quite long, so I'm a little bit
I didn't know he was still around. It's great that you're still in contact with him. Is that on your channel, that interview?
Yeah, I posted. I went live last night, so I
wow.
have a
Yeah, I missed that.
6-hour-long live stream on my channel from
wow.
last night. We talked
Right.
about everything. Yeah, it's interesting. So I just reached out to him because I saw him on Jed's channel, and he just said a few things that were interesting to me. And when he was in the Flat Earth community, we're talking about John LeBon, by the way. I don't think I made that quite clear. My guest from yesterday's live stream. When he was in the Flat Earth community a couple of years ago, I just thought he did a good job of holding us to account, of preventing flat earthers from incorporating too much speculation into the models that we were creating. And I think that had a lot of value, but I think that some flat earthers were very hostile towards him because of it, because he didn't let people get away with saying the dome is made of blue sapphire. He was like, where is your evidence for that? You have none. Right. So no, it's probably not, right? And I think that was a good thing. I think the community needed that because things were starting to go a little bit off the rails. But so I heard him on Jed, and so I just sent him a message saying, you know what, let's have a chat. And so he said yes, came on my channel. We talked about everything. It was fantastic. I hope to have him on again.
One of my favorite interviews that you had, or conversations, I should say, that you had was with Cathexis. Are you still in contact with him?
Not at all. I don't think I've even spoken to him since that interview. And we were talking about complexity at all levels of reality.
Right. I still have a playlist of his videos on my channel that I just keep on there just to, his.
Nice.
Yeah, I always enjoyed Cathexis. Peace to the gods.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Like because I'm changing my channel for 2020, so I kind of thought before I make massive changes, I think anyway, I just thought, why not take the opportunity to try to have conversations with people that I've been would have liked to have talked to for the past couple of years. So
that's cool.
So I've reached out to a few people. Someone said something in chat that I wanted to respond to. Wide Awake, hello there, Wide Awake, said, hidden ancient knowledge is kept from humanity to keep us in the dark and to make us have faith in science. And it's an interesting comment because I think that is true, that the scientism has replaced science. And, the more I think about it objectively, right? Because I used to be in science and I was such a fan of it, and I was a devotee in the cult of science. But the more I think about it now from a distance, the more I'm not convinced that it is a powerful way of acquiring knowledge about our world. The more I'm finding myself doubting its impact on human health and human progress and all these different things. So, and I'm not saying we should get rid of science. I'm not saying that the idea of observing and collecting data and analyzing the data and repeating the experiment, drawing conclusions from it, I'm not saying that whole thing is a garbage way of acquiring knowledge about our world. I just think we've given it supremacy in a way that we probably shouldn't have, and that we ought to start looking at. And I don't want to say mysticism, because the problem is that science has the same flaws as mysticism has, right? In both, there are biases and there are ways for errors to creep in, and those errors accumulate, and you end up getting further and further and further from the truth, and you don't even realize it. So in mysticism, you end up with New Agers rubbing, I don't know, lava on their foreheads in order to see goddess, right? And then in science, you have pharmaceutical companies giving us drugs that cause suicide to help relieve depression, right? So I think both mysticism and science suffer from the flaw that leads to the same outcome, which is the more you allow that to be your only avenue to truth, the more that truth becomes corrupted and no longer true, and it's no longer knowledge, and then it's just make believe. So we have physicists talking about dark matter making up dark matter and dark energy undetectable, invisible, but it makes up 99%, 97.5% of the universe, right? That is ridiculous. And matter only exists when it's measured. And so then all these other implications of that. So science has gone off the rails and is creating these fantastical models. And astronomers are constantly baffled by new observations that don't fit their models. And so clearly science is just now making up its own little world, and it's very good at describing its own little world, but that world it's describing has less and less relation to the world we actually live in. But mysticism does the same, and I think religion to a certain extent does the same, right? And that's the quandary we find ourselves in, is that we're given this binary choice and both of them lead to the same outcome. So what do you do? And I think that the solution is we have to put them on equal footing and say, okay, so now let's find the truths that come out of both that are in common, that share the same information. That's probably more true than the information that comes from either one of them that doesn't overlap with information coming from the other system of knowledge acquisition, right? And to me, I think that's the sweet spot, right? If you're getting this from mysticism and you're getting this from science and it's saying the same thing, let's go with that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm reminded of is, that idea between science and scientism, and there's various fields of scientific study that are so theoretical and so just kind of conceptual that it really needs to be tempered. I mean, they're treated, astrophysics especially is treated as like the pinnacle of science, and it really is just so much just conceptual, kind of speculative, you know. I find there to be a lot of drivel basically infused in it, and the same goes for the people that have qualms about hard science, you know, biology and chemistry, that's very materialistic and nuts and bolts. You know, people that have problem with hard sciences, maybe because they're just not their skill level. What, you know, everyone has different things that they're good at understanding. Like some people are better at, you know, theoretical math equations than others.
Of understanding, right? So hard science comes more easily to some than others, yeah.
And then, I mean, and so people that aren't as kind of
analysis
interest, they're not in the left brain kind of mindset. They're more creative, or, you know, kind of balanced between the left brain and right brain thinking. You know, even that topic is kind of controversial. But people, you know, you're kind of corralled into either being into religious research, you know, or embracing faith as your replacement for hard science and what mainstream 21st century science is telling you what their cosmology is, that we're on a spinning ball and we're evolved from, you know, these lesser forms of apes, and, you know, that you just go down that line. But people that are corralled into religion, or they're corralled into some of this esoteric hermeticism, alchemical Gnosticism, mumbo jumbo, which I'm interested in all these sorts of things just to kind of look at it. But if the farther you go down that Gurdjieff and Rudolf Steiner and Theosophical Society stuff with Alice Bailey and all that kind of stuff, that's very woo to me. That's very you're just taking some person's word for, a lot of these, the Theosophical Society, in fact, they drew a lot of Eastern religion, Eastern culture into and infused it with their Western thought. And so there's a lot of, like, what were they really trying to get at? What were they really trying to push? Concepts of that are just so, it's basically you're taking one guru or one charlatan's word for something, and what is that worldview really leading you down to? And I think there's dangers in that. And yeah, you could spend a lifetime, you could literally spend like hours and hours and hours naming off all these non-governmental organizations, foundations, government think tanks, secret societies, the Cistercians, the Freemasons, the Jesuits. You could go hours and hours and name off all these groups, but where is that really getting you? Because it's all kind of like, it's like,
that's one of the things that, it's just this idea that there is no perfect system, right. and people want a perfect system. So when they see flaws in one system, they're like, nope, that's a bad system because it's not perfect. Yeah, okay, that's true, but there is no perfect system. So we have to figure out how to do better. But we can't hold out for best, and you can't just say, well, this has flaws, so we have to, this no good. It might still have useful elements to it. And it's the same with political systems. Capitalism has flaws.
There are blind spots, for sure.
But that doesn't mean we throw it away and all become communist Soviet Union, right? Because that has worse flaws. So this idea that once you've pointed out the flaws in one system, then that's sufficient to justify getting rid of that system. I think that's so wrong. We just have to figure out, okay, how do we incrementally improve the system? You can't do it drastically, because drastic changes typically lead to destabilization, and then the thugs come in and the system collapses and you have a reign of terror, and the thugs are the ones that are just taking control. So we do have to be careful in how we do things. I do want to show just a quick image of the salt mine. So Adi Roos, Naptachinta is his YouTube channel. He's the one that organized the Flat Earth Conference in Romania, where I was invited to speak, and I did a great presentation that I'm excited to share with you guys. I think next week I will be posting that on my channel, but I do want to share this photo, and then I think we'll say goodnight if I can find the photo.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on, Sasha. It's been a while since we've talked.
I know, it's been forever. I have been less active just in general on my channel. So if you want to talk to chat while I bring up this image, that would be great.
I was just going to say, people are wondering what our secret society is going to be called. So I think you have to think about that, Sasha.
Okay, I will put
all I know is Baby Yoda is my guru.
Oh my goodness. Yes. So memeable. Yeah, I know. The thing is, I think that the name is going to be secret, because I think a secret society, that's the whole point of the secret society. If you're not in it, you don't know anything about it, right?
Right. It's so secret, even the people that are in it don't even know what the hell.
Don't know they're in it. Oh la la. Okay, maybe I should be able to share a screen now. Let's see if that works. Right side up. Be a light in the world. If you can't be a light in the world, get the hell out of my chat. Okay, so, and if you don't leave, I will remove you. Here we see a beautiful picture of the salt mines in Romania. And it's built with these little pyramidal kind of triangular pathways you have to walk under, and the play of light. It's really an incredible place. And the scale, I don't know if you can see this, but these are little humans here. So this is actually enormous. And maybe I'll see if I can just scroll around a bit to some of the other images I took. I still want to do a video showing more of my images of the salt mine and of my trip to Romania. I just have a lot
That's
going
really
on.
cool.
Yeah, it's hard to get a sense of the scale of just how enormous this is from these images, but it's just incredible. And the echo, I have some audio. So anyway, I will be doing a video about that at some point soon. I keep promising it, and then I never actually get around to it. So anyway. Okay, thank you so much for being here, Persian Scribe. Everyone in chat, thank you so much. It's been great. And happy sleeps, Antonio, if you're still listening. Persian Scribe, yeah, we'll have to do this again sometime, maybe on your channel, maybe on mine, I don't know, but we'll see what happens.
For sure. Thanks for the invite.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Very
Good night.
interesting.